This is the lecture for Chapter 6, Cognitive Development According to Piaget. It's only the first half of Chapter 6, so you'll read the second half of Chapter 6 next week on Vygotsky. We're going to look at how to define Piaget's theory and how to apply it to the classroom. Okay. So the first assumption of Piaget's theory, children are active and motivated learners. This is one of my favorite right from the beginning. It's saying that children are active in the process. Children are active in the process of learning. They are out there, hands-on, figuring things out. Manipulating things, learning, questioning. They're curious. They want to know what's going on. Okay? So think about that in terms of education. What's the application here already, right from the start? How can we bridge this developmental theory into the classroom? Hands-on activities, sure. The normal model, or the old model for teaching, was that students sit and people dump information in. You receive, right? That's not it. That's what you guys are probably most familiar with at the college level. For Piaget, he said, no, you can't just dump knowledge and understanding into somebody. They have to do something with it. They have to work on it. They have to be active in the process. Okay, so already we have a great application that we can take from Piaget's theory. So that's the first one. Second piece here, children organize what they learn from their experiences. So they're going to organize what they learn from their experiences. Nobody's experiences are exactly the same. All of you sitting in this classroom are having different experiences. Your perception of what's going on, your understanding, your interpretation, all of that is creating your experience in here. So although we are all in the same classroom talking and hearing the same things, the experience can be different. Everybody builds their learning based on their own experiences. Okay? So Tessa's experience is different than Kenny's experience in the back. All right, the way that we do that is a process where we have schemes. This is a basic unit of knowledge. We'll break that down in a minute. And then we adapt or change our schemes in two different ways, either through assimilation or through accommodation. This is what we're going to focus on in our little mini lecture today. This process of assimilation and accommodation and what that means for learning. This piece here, interaction with others and the environment, is essential. We've already talked about how the child is active in the process. So they're out there in the environment exploring. But it's also that they're interacting with other people. Next week we're going to cover Vygotsky, and he's more of the social interaction theorist. So usually when we think interact with people, we think Vygotsky. So it's important to acknowledge that Piaget says too, that that's going to help build understanding. The interactions that we have with other people. Okay. He doesn't focus or emphasize on that as much as we'll see next week. All right, so you guys know that I like analogies and metaphors, and so for this week, what I want you to think of is building a house. That's going to be kind of our metaphor for today's class, building a house. Piaget's theory is called the constructivist theory. So that matches up nicely, right, with construction. It's a constructivist theory. I can't even say it right now. And I'm not going to pretend that I know how to build a house, okay? Because I really have no idea. But I can break it down into three pretty basic steps. The first step is that you've got to have a foundation for your house. And it looks like this one's concrete. Okay? Foundation for your house. Then you're going to build up from there. Okay, so here we've got some walls coming out. You can see some doors. You can see the layout of the house. And now finally we have, that's all it takes to build a house. Now finally you have this nice structure here. Okay? And hopefully it's got granite countertops and nice appliances and everything's wonderful. Learning is the same way for Piaget. Okay, so bear with me. We start with something basic and then we're going to build on to that. So all of our learning is building upon other things that we know. So that's the constructivist piece. Okay. So development builds on prior acquisitions. It does so by you being active in the environment, exploring, questioning, working with new material. You have to do it. This house doesn't build itself. Okay? So does that make sense for everybody? All right. So, just to reiterate, one of the parts that's really important is that everybody is a little bit different here. Because what you have experienced is different than what somebody else experiences. So you're building your understanding and your knowledge in a unique way that's different than somebody else. Okay? So these are the basic assumptions of the theory, and I want to spend time looking at this part, this assimilation and accommodation, the actual process by which we learn something. So it all starts with a scheme, also called a schema. And since Piaget, there have been many, many schema theorists, okay, that have worked to really refine and study this concept. So a scheme is a very basic unit of knowledge, a basic understanding of something. So we have schemes for everything. You have a scheme for taking notes. It's all of the things that you're doing. You pay attention, you write things down. Some of you use bullet points, others highlight. Do so when you're sitting in a college class. You know when to take notes, when not to take notes. You know what to star. You have a whole understanding of what goes on for taking notes. Schemes can be much more simple than that. They can be much more complicated than that. But they're basic units of understanding. They're interrelated ideas. Okay? So cognitive or mental structures by which people intellectually adapt to and organize their environment. It's how you understand the things that are around you and the things that you do. So here is an example of a scheme, an organized group of thoughts used in response to the environment. This is a scheme that I created for a relationship. Okay. What you see right here is a link node diagram, and this is what schema theorists use when they're talking about schemes. The basic idea is you have the scheme, the topic here, and you have all of these ideas or things that go with that scheme, that make it up. And this is just a way of visually depicting kind of an abstract idea. So in my scheme for a relationship, I have that it's cooperative, maybe a companion at the top, love and compassion, maybe it's romantic. Isn't this great? It's such a great relationship. Does anybody have any other ideas of what a relationship is?
Arguments.
Arguments. Anything else?
Fun.
Fun, sure. Trust, jealousy, remorse. Who knows, right? But Caleb, right, said arguments. Maybe because his experience has led him to create a scheme for relationship that includes arguments. His scheme is different from mine based on our experiences. So every scheme that we have is different based on these experiences. Okay? And this is just a basic unit of knowledge. And we all have them for everything. All right, so here's an example of relationship. I want you to think from a 3-year-old perspective. It's going to let's say third grader, with 3-year-old perspective. You are 3. This is easier for some of you than others. You are 3, and I want you to create a scheme for a dog. Okay, for that little friend right there. Stop. Well, put it down on your page. Share your schemes. Go ahead. What did you put down? Share with each other.
Yeah, so I put vertical arcs and 4 legs. I did wolf.
Would you put
Wolf. Yeah, exactly. And some kids I noticed, they think like just so they see like a cow with like 4 legs or something. They might actually do that. Yeah.
Do you have anything in your schemes that are similar? Like what? What's similar? Barking. Soft. Tail. Anything else? Dissimilar things?
friendly?
Friendly. Yeah, maybe not everybody put friendly.
I got playful.
Playful. Okay, those kind of go hand in hand, but a little different. Food? Like you want to eat the dog? Or the dog's going to eat you?
Well, I don't know.
You're 3, remember? Yeah. You're going to eat the dog's food. That's more like a 3-year-old. Did anybody have anything more negative? Scary? Teeth?
I said smelly.
Smelly? Sure, yeah. I put smelly too. Yeah. Yeah. Some people might have had bad experiences with a dog, and their schema for dog might look a lot different than somebody who hasn't had a bad experience, right? But we have things that are all pretty much the same or similar as well, right? Because those are inherent in what the dog is. There's some truth in that. There's some understanding, some real facts there about what a dog is, okay? All right, so that's a scheme. We're going to work with this basic dog scheme as an example. So stick with that, we're still 3 years old. The first thing that's going to happen is a process called assimilation. Okay? In assimilation, what you have is your scheme is essentially built onto or elaborated onto. So it's this basic cognitive process. The person integrates new information into the existing scheme or into the existing pattern of behavior. So remember, we have to go back to the first assumption. We're active in the process. So I'm out there exploring. I'm in the backyard. I'm 3, playing in the backyard, beautiful day, hanging out with my dog friend. Everything's good, right? So Wyatt has 4 legs, is furry, and smells funny. That was my scheme. What is it? It's a dog. Yeah, that's my scheme. Everything's cool, hanging out with the dog. We're playing in the backyard, kicking a ball around. Things are cool, right? And then I see another little furry creature crawl out of the woods. Comes out, he wants to play too. And I'm 3. And I see him, and I say, what do I say? Hi. Dog! Hey, dog! Hi, little dog friend. Come join our game. Me and my dog are having a lot of fun here. Right? But immediately I say, dog. Why? 4 legs, furry, smells funny, maybe even makes some noises like the dog. It's very much like the dog, right? So what I'm doing is I'm encountering something new in my environment, and I'm going through this process of assimilation. Okay? I'm just keeping it with the same old scheme that I have. Maybe I notice that he looks a little bit different. Okay, maybe he behaves a little bit more differently, but he's still fitting my scheme, so I take that new information and I put it in with what I've got. I assimilate. Okay, and I feel good. I'm happy about it. I'm 3, and
parents come out and freak out.
yeah, you're exactly right. Until I'm feeling great. I'm assimilating. My world makes sense. Right? But then I turn around and my mom, who is on the patio, is freaking out.
Bethany!
Yeah, or Ray is on the patio and he is freaking out. What are you doing? Screaming, scared, running towards me. Okay? Then, heaven forbid, I turn around and I see a much bigger dog coming out of the woods. This thing times 20. And I think to myself, wait a minute. What's going on here? Yeah. I thought you were a dog friend. But my mom is yelling at me, and there's like a really big one who's way scary. Big teeth, standing up. Can I assimilate anymore? No. Yeah, this is where accommodation comes in. I can't look at that huge dog that is so different and make it fit with what I already know. And I don't feel good about it. It's strange, it's awkward, it's uncomfortable, there's a little bit of anxiety. Okay? So I need to create a new scheme. That's the process of accommodation. You encounter something while you are active in the learning or in the environment that you cannot explain anymore. You do not have a scheme that works for understanding this new idea or set of ideas. Okay? Doesn't fit anymore. So what I have to do is create an entirely new scheme or modify what I thought I knew to be something pretty much entirely different. That's a process of accommodation. So I'm in the backyard, the big bear's there, my mom's freaking out. Hopefully I run to safety and I think to myself, oh, what was that? And all of a sudden my parents start saying things like, oh, do you remember when that bear was in the backyard? They call Grandma, there's a bear in the backyard. We barely got Bethany out alive. That's a terrible story. Let's just assume I made it unscathed through this backyard exploration. Okay. But I start hearing this word bear, and now I will create an entirely new scheme, and I will label it as such. So I have a dog scheme, and I have accommodated making an entirely new scheme for a bear. So this process, this is learning. This is it. This is how we learn information from Piaget's theory. It all happens through this balance of assimilation and accommodation. What happens in the what happens if in your environment you don't encounter anything new and strange and unexplainable? I don't know, like a cardboard box, or you're locked in a room, something. You don't experience anything like that.
Then you won't learn.
Then you won't learn.
And
Absolutely.
You won't have any, isn't that like those children that like, can't talk or anything and have like no social skills?
Sure. You're going to the extreme. But if you're not presented with anything in the environment that's new and challenging, you will never accommodate. You will never learn. Okay?
Take a minute here to make sure you understand the process of disequilibrium. This is where challenge falls in Piaget's theory.
On the stages.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
So I made it a point to bring up in that painting exercise and in the dog example that you need to feel some level of discomfort when you're approaching or encountering something new in your environment, or else you won't learn anything. And this is a process of equilibration, which is important to outline. This has a lot of educational implications. So we're presented with new ideas, new things in the environment, and we're active in trying to make sense of them. We want to make sense of our world. We want to understand what's going on. When we can, we assimilate. And remember, we feel good about that. When we're assimilating, we feel good. We're in equilibrium. Everything's all right. It was just like resting potential last week. Chilling, everything's cool. now we're exposed to something that we can't make sense of. Something new that doesn't fit in with our existing scheme. Here we feel disequilibrium. And look at all these words in here: discrepancy, questions, chaos, unease. When you created that gross greeny olive color, it was like, ugh, disequilibrium. You have to then accommodate and learn or create a new scheme. So what's the application here? What's the important point for teaching? That's a great application, that you want to build on old ideas to start with that, but that's not necessarily the one here. That one we're going to get to in a minute, so you're right on. What's the application with this disequilibrium piece? What does this mean for the classroom? Ray, can you help us out? You had a great example the other day.
You have to take kids out of their comfort zone and make them experience something that they don't expect, something that they can't assimilate.
Yeah, and what happened to you?
I was feeling really poorly in one of my other classes.
I'm going to call him out.
It's okay. And I went and I spoke with my professor and I told him that I didn't feel like I was at the level of the other students in the class. And what he told me was that it's good that I'm not at the level, because if I was at the level of the other students in the class, or thought that I was, then I wouldn't learn anything. So he liked the fact that I wasn't up here, that I was somewhere down here, because he said that was how I was going to learn in the class.
If you know everything and you can assimilate it all and fit it all in, then are you learning? No, you're not. Everything's comfortable and good, right? We've been in those classes. It feels good, it's easy, everything's fine, but you're not learning. So for our students to learn, you need to challenge them. This is where challenge comes in for Piaget, and that's super important, challenge. If you do not challenge them, if they don't feel this disequilibrium, this discomfort, they are not going to learn anything new. And that's what we're trying to do, right, as teachers or as students. So we need to challenge them. They need to feel a little bit uncomfortable. They need that, or else the learning's not going to happen. Okay? All right, got some questions for you. Let's see, this is our friend Piaget over here. So why is it that babies have to put everything in their mouths, their nose, their ears? Why? Why do they do that?
I don't know what it does, what it is.
Yeah, they want to know what it is. They want to figure it out. Right? Yeah. So this is the way that babies figure things out. They put it in their mouth. This putting in your mouth behavior, they have a scheme for that. It's one of the first behavioral schemes that comes up. Okay? So to figure something out, I will use my scheme. I'll put it in my mouth. Okay. Why is it that toddlers can't play hide and seek? Have you tried this? What do they not understand?
What concept?
Or if they can't see you, that they're hiding. So they just turn around and cover their eyes and they're hiding.
Yeah, try this. Close your eyes for a second. Close your eyes. I'm going to hide. Okay. Do they not do this though? Like there'll be a mound of covers and the feet will be hanging out? Yeah, Erin.
I work in a daycare, and this one kid, he was hiding in the play structure, but the thing was he was on the side of the structure that we could see, but he was like this.
So yeah, just the simple close of the eyes,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
Let's just go into infancy. Peekaboo. Peekaboo. Why is that so funny? Because you're gone.
I don't
Because
know.
you are actually gone. And now you're back. Oh my God. That's crazy. That'll make me laugh too. Right? You guys threw around a lot of awesome ideas here. What are some, you said this term before, earlier in the class. What's one of the terms that we could use to describe this? Object permanence, it has to do with the peekaboo. Yep. Yeah. Knowing that something exists even when you can't physically see it. There's another term we talked about with pre-operational kids. I think Tess, you might have given us the definition of it. Egocentrism. Yeah. Yep. If I can't see you, you can't see me. Right? Yeah. Okay. Why can't you reason with a preschooler? Because they're right. Huh?
Brain's not fully developed.
Sure, it's definitely. This is all definitely based on the biological maturation, like we covered last week. Yep. It's that logic and reasoning ability, right? And they just want to say why, but then how, but what, and what next, and why. It's fun. Why isn't that pre-adolescent scream not fair? So much.
Because they can't see it from another point of view.
Yeah, they have difficulty looking at multiple perspectives. Sure. This one is one of my favorites. Why is it that young adolescents care so much about what others think? So, I cannot go to school today, Mom, because my shoes are not the shoes that everybody has and wants, and this is the end of the world, and you're a terrible mother.
They want to be liked and involved.
Uh-huh. Yeah, so a lot of it has to do with peer relationships. Sure. But cognitively. She said that, he said that, I went to school in the wrong shoes, and I don't want anybody to say that about me again. Adolescence, right? But why? Yeah, say it.
Self-consciousness.
Yeah, they're self-conscious, and it's their cognitive process. It's where they're cognitively that makes them self-conscious. So thinking about other people's thinking is relatively new for them and difficult, and so it's almost like they're obsessed with it.
Central conceptual structure.
That plays a role, yep. The imaginary audience plays a role, yeah. Yep. So for the first time, really, as an adolescent, I'm really thinking about other people's thoughts. And I'm really concerned with that, and I'm analyzing it, and I'm overthinking it. Okay. This goes away with maturation. As the prefrontal cortex matures, our decision-making, our reasoning, a lot of that worry goes away. But at first, it's like, whoa, I never really had to think about anybody else. And now I do. And it's really overwhelming and intense, and I think everybody's thinking about me. Right? It's a tough time. So all of these questions can be explained through Piaget's stages. So what we've been doing so far is going ahead and looking at how people learn. Piaget's most well noted for and probably cited for his stage theory, where he breaks down 4 basic cognitive stages of development. And what I like so much about his theory is that it explains things like this that we see all the time in our kids, right? You'll see these all the time. So I want to spend just a few minutes talking about what the stages are and what goes into each of those stages. We're not going into detail here, but you should read and fill in the gaps in your notes about what's going on at each stage. This is developmentally appropriate practice, right? If I am a preschool teacher, I really ought to know the pre-operational stage, the ins and outs, what makes these kids tick, how do they think, what are their strengths and their weaknesses. And Piaget is used a lot for that purpose. Okay? So starting off the beginning, we have the sensory motor stage. Just break down the word to help you. Sensory motor. Sensation and motor. Sensation, I'm going to put everything in my mouth. I figure out my world by touching it, smelling it, putting it in my mouth. It's all sensory oriented. I'm building my basic schemes here. I'm out there exploring in the environment, and I'm doing it with my sensation and my motor skills that are developing. So it's outside of the body, is the way that I like to think of it. Everything's out there. And I'm trying to get it in. At the end of this stage, we use the object permanence test. Yeah, Kenny.
So can they be in more than one stage at once?
No, not
Because-
according to Piaget.
Because I disagree with him a little bit.
Yeah.
Because I think like some of the special ed kids are in
Uh-huh.
both where their thought process maybe is concrete operations, but then in terms of, they're still aware of what people think of them and don't
Sure.
want certain things.
Yeah, I would agree with you, and I think a lot of criticisms of Piaget is that it doesn't take into account non-normative development at all. Piaget's theory, being a stage theory, says you have to move from one to the next, to the next, to the next, in that order. And another good, since we're on criticisms of Piaget's theory, is that he really did underestimate children's abilities. So a lot of the research that has come since then says that children do some of these things way earlier than he might have thought. Okay? So it's helpful and it's informative, but I think it's really good. There's actually a good, I believe, section in your book that talks a little bit about neo-Pigetian ideas and some criticism. So great point. Yeah. So sensory motor, at the end of sensory motor, you'll see the development of object permanence, the understanding that things can exist when they're not physically available to me, so I don't have to actually sense them. And that's the first step or indication that they have some symbolic thought. And then we're into the pre-operational stage. Okay, pre-operation meaning before operations, and you can think of operations as logical thinking. Okay. So this is what we looked at earlier today with the YouTube clip, so I'm not going to go into too much detail there. The conservation task is used often to assess pre-operational children. Next we move into concrete operations, and now we have more logical thought patterns, more abstract, starting to get some abstract principles, but really we're still tied to reality. So when I'm thinking logically or starting to think abstract, there still has to be something that I can latch onto to understand. Clear examples, things that I've actually experienced. And then finally we have, that's what that means by concrete reality. Something has to be, real. Then we have formal operations, which is our adolescence into adulthood. And now, whereas up here we were all physical, we can say cognitively we can be entirely within the mind. We can think about abstract ideas, think about thinking. We can reason logically inside. We are detached now from anything concrete or physical. So we basically moved from the outside in through his stages. So you want to fill in the gaps there in your reading. And then the application we've been working on as we've been going along. So I had a bunch of bullet points here. We don't have time to get into them, but look at them in your book or pull up the lecture notes. Giving students a chance to experiment with the physical world, we know that, hands-on. Process of thinking, that assimilation and accommodation. Let's see, what else do I want to highlight? Challenge. Challenge is really important. This is the one that you brought up, that you need to start with something they understand. Let them start by assimilating, and then bring in new ideas so that they can accommodate. Remember, we build on prior acquisitions. So when you're starting a new lesson, start with things that they do know, and then build in the challenge. Okay? Children are active, they do the mental work. So make sure to check those out. Here's what we covered and what we didn't cover as a quick review. Big piece here, assimilation and accommodation and hands-on learning. Okay? And then go into detail, especially on some of those stages and the application tips.
Here's the summary for the lecture that you just saw. We spent a lot of time on equilibration, assimilation, and accommodation, so how people learn in general. We didn't spend as much time on the stages, so you want to make sure that you pay attention to that in your readings and your studying.